Welcome to our next birding webinar. Please let us know through the chat box on your screen that you can hear us and that you can see the screen. So we'll start with that. And again, on behalf of the Missouri Department of Conservation, I'm your host, Joe Jarek, and I'd like to welcome you, and I'd like to welcome our state ornithologist, Kristen Heath-Acre, who is back again for one of our birding webinars. Kristen, what are we talking about today?
Hi, Joe. We are talking about bird migration today, specifically the full annual cycle of bird conservation.
All right, so what they are and where they go throughout the year.
Yeah, exactly. Full annual cycle is kind of a funny way of saying it, but we're just talking about the year in a life of a bird that migrates. And we're going to first kind of set the stage, though. We're going to talk about bird declines, kind of why we're concerned about migratory birds, and why we're researching them and what we're doing about it. And then we're going to go into an overview of what migration is, what it looks like, why do birds migrate? You know, there's this kind of big mystery of why birds migrate.
And even where they go a lot. If they leave here, we don't know where they go.
Exactly. So we're trying to figure that out. Wood thrush.
And who's this little guy in the corner?
Yeah, so this is a wood thrush. This is a great example of a bird that breeds in Missouri, but makes an extraordinary migratory movement every year.
All right. And again, folks, we're happy you joined us. We will answer your questions throughout this. So if you have them, we'll do the best we can. Please submit your questions to the chat box, and we'll get Kristen to answer them as we go through this.
Yep. We're going to talk a little bit about research and what MDC is doing to help migratory birds, and at the very end we're going to talk about the Missouri Birding Challenge.
Right, coming up.
Yep.
And birds are in trouble. Like, we're talking some significant trouble here for a lot of these birds.
Exactly. So a study came out in 2019. It came out of the journal Science, and they showed that we have lost 3 billion birds in North America in the past 50 years. This was
billion. That's 3 billion with a B.
With a B, yes. So this was very alarming, not just to researchers, but the public as well. And they actually showed that a vast majority of those 3 billion birds lost are migratory birds, like this Baltimore Oriole you see here. We've lost 2 in 5 Baltimore Orioles. We've lost 6 in 10 wood thrush. And it's easy to kind of understand why, because these birds face so many different threats along, not just on their breeding grounds, but along their migratory pathways and on their winter grounds. So this is a great example. Again, the wood thrush. This is a bird that breeds in Missouri. And what you're seeing here is an abundance map. That dark blue indicates high abundance.
So as we could see, this is their migration throughout the year. So we're going from January, as you could see, folks, into December.
Now we're in the wintering grounds. So these birds, we like to think of them as our birds here in Missouri, but really in reality, they spend a vast majority of their time elsewhere, along their migratory route and on their wintering grounds in Central and South America, mostly Central America. They actually will fly across the Gulf of Mexico.
They fly across the Gulf of Mexico. Folks, that's about 800 miles nonstop.
Yes, it's extraordinary. And they do it, you know, within a day or two. It's really remarkable. And it's easy to understand it. There are many threats along the way. And so we are certainly concerned about migratory birds. And even if we had the best, you know, habitat in Missouri possible, when they leave our borders, you know,
that's only one part of their annual life.
Exactly.
So this really is a national and even international effort that we need to do here.
Okay, and these are other examples of breeding birds in Missouri, and these are actually photos taken in Honduras. So
the birds look familiar, but the plant life doesn't look local.
It looks a little different. So yeah, we really need to think about these birds outside of our borders. You're seeing here a yellow-breasted chat, a Baltimore Oriole, that orange bird in the middle, a summer tanager on the branch on the top right, a hooded warbler, Kentucky warbler. These are beautiful birds that you find in Missouri, but they winter elsewhere. Of course, when you talk about migratory birds, you really need to understand not just migratory birds, but resident birds or non-migratory birds. And these are great examples of birds that actually breed in Missouri, but stick around all winter long. These species have adapted to find food in the winter, in our chilly winters. They have adapted to find shelter. So that bottom left one, do you know what that is, Joe?
Tufted titmouse.
Good. What about the middle one?
It is a woodpecker. Is it a yellow or
That's a
red-bellied?
red-bellied woodpecker.
Red-bellied
Very good.
woodpecker. And the last one is a mystery to me.
That one's a northern mockingbird.
Oh, mockingbird.
So
Okay.
that purple color you see on those maps indicates that those birds are there all year round. So they've adapted to winter. Now, when we look at migratory birds, that's quite a bit different. You see lots of colors there. That kind of reddish color is their breeding grounds.
So this is the thrush again that we met earlier.
Yep, that's the wood thrush there on the left. And you can see the yellow is their migratory route, and the blue is where they spend the winter. That middle one is a scarlet tanager. Again, they breed in Missouri, migrate through southern United States, and winter in South America. And barn swallow is really the big hitter here. They migrate thousands of miles every year. They're actually a global species. I'm showing the Western hemisphere there on that map, but you find them all over the world. And they just, even for a tiny bird, they make really extraordinary movements.
That is amazing. So we're talking from Alaska going down to the tip of South America.
Exactly.
That's a lot of miles.
Yes, that is. And it depends on where they start and where they
Right,
end up.
right.
But it can be absolutely thousands of miles every year, twice a year, going north and going south.
That makes it even more amazing because this isn't
Exactly.
like a one-way trip.
Yeah.
They're going down and coming back and going down and
Exactly.
coming back.
They do it twice a year.
Right.
So we have different distance migrants. We have our short distance migrants. A great example is the American robin. Many of you are familiar with the American robin. They may just move across the landscape. So you might imagine these birds stay in Missouri. They're looking for food as winter, resources shift, or they're just trying to find a good meal every day. So they're gonna move around just short distances. Or perhaps the species might migrate from a higher elevation to a lower elevation.
I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later as far as what's driving some of this, but food availability over the winter. So if the bird is primarily a seed eater or kind of that, there aren't a lot of insects in Missouri in the winter.
Yes.
So it's kind of on what their diet is and some other factors.
Yeah, exactly. And those are those adaptations we were talking about resident birds have. They've adapted to these food sources that you find in the winter, and it's going to be less dependent on insects, as you might imagine. Medium distant migrants, American woodcock are a good example of that. You find them in the winter in the southeastern United States. Some birds that start in the southeastern United States stay there. So some species are a mixture of short distance or medium distance migrants. And long distance migrants, again, a great example is the barn swallow. Their ranges extend from the US to Canada to Mexico, Central America, South America. Really, really extraordinary migratory movements.
Those are some amazing migrations. And it's funny, I don't know, growing up, the robin was like that harbinger of spring. It's like when you saw a first robin in the spring, spring was here, but now they're really just here year round.
Yep, they are. And
Chat.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Sherry wants to know on the map for the barn swallow, the pinkish color down in South America.
Yeah, so that is probably a local resident population, or they might actually migrate south as opposed to north. So that, again, these species are a mixture of different strategies, even within a species, so that those birds probably migrate from another area. I'll have to look that one up, though. I'm not familiar with that population.
Do we know, or the robins in Canada, now would they go south more?
They would go south more.
So say into Missouri?
Yeah, so they might not stick around in Canada. They might be a mixture of medium distance migrants.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's another strategy. Species will who are farther north will migrate farther south.
Right, and there's a whole lot of species of birds that do this. This is also amazing.
Yeah, so 1,800 of the over 10,000 bird species in the world are long distance migrants.
Long distance.
Long distance, yes.
Wow.
And 650 of those are found in North America. They nest in North America. And if we zoom into Missouri, where we see 330 some odd species annually present, 170 of those actually breed in Missouri. And 50% of those birds that breed in Missouri leave Missouri every year. And 30% leave the US entirely. So Missouri has a lot of migratory birds that not only leave Missouri, but leave the US.
So if I'm taking the information, 335 species we could find in Missouri at some part throughout the year.
Yes, exactly. So there might be birds that just migrate through. For example, golden wing warblers. You're only going to see them migrating through generally. And that would be one of those species you just see annually. But 170 species breed in Missouri.
So we would see, could we potentially see 170 species then for the first Missouri Birding Challenge?
Potentially,
Coming up in
yeah.
May?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you work really hard, you can see.
Okay, it's a challenge, folks.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Speaking of extraordinary migratory birds, there are some real big hitters.
These are
when
the
it comes to
Olympians,
migration.
right?
These are the Olympians, the elite. So Arctic terns have the record for miles flown in a year. So almost 50,000 miles flown each year, and they're very,
If they only had a frequent flyer program,
they would be so rich.
right?
So many free flights. Yeah, they migrate from the Arctic and breed, they breed in the Arctic and they migrate south to Antarctic area, and their migratory route just takes them in this huge circle.
All right, let's go back to that. So they go from the Arctic, like by the North Pole,
to breed.
Yes. And then they go down, did you say to Antarctica? South Pole.
During the winter, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they're awesome. Barred-tailed godwits have the record for
odd guy up in the corner.
Yeah, the top right, the long bill. They migrate up to 7,000 miles nonstop. So they have the record for nonstop flight. 7,000 miles.
That's fast too. Not only are they flying far, but in 9 days they're going fast.
They're going fast.
Yep, right, and exactly. These geese, fast and
high.
There.
Yeah, barred-headed geese have been seen flying over the Himalayas, upwards of 6 miles in altitude. So these birds, the adaptation
6 miles.
6 miles to do this is just.
Now we're not going to get into details, but like you said, the adaptations. There's not a whole lot of oxygen 6 miles up.
Right. Yep.
Right. So this is just, they really are the Olympians.
Yes.
This is phenomenal.
Yep. Exactly. So it brings, begs the question, why would they do this? It's a long distance. It's really difficult. It's very risky. And we've seen that migratory birds have been declining at higher rates. So why would birds adapt to migrate? So there's lots of things a bird species would adapt for. So food availability, for example, in the winter, you're not going to have as much food. And so some birds have adapted to migrate back south, where in the tropics or neotropics, there's lots of food all year round.
We were talking, especially if they're insect eaters or like berry eaters, not a lot in Missouri in the winter. So,
right. Yep.
So right, food availability.
Food availability, breeding opportunities. The thing about the tropics, there's lots of predators. And so breeding opportunities, you're going to increase as you go north.
So less risky the further you move north, because like fewer predators in that kind of tropical environment.
Yes, and less competition.
And
so
competition.
The tropics are very diverse. There's lots of species. There's lots of competition, and so it's worth the risk for these birds to migrate north.
Do they and they congregate? I think, would they be in larger numbers in some of these tropical areas? So again, increased competition in just larger numbers of them.
Yep. And if you look at those, abundance maps that change over time, you'll notice they concentrate in areas at higher numbers, and then they kind of spread out when they fly north. Yeah. So there's lots of reasons why bird species have adapted to take on this risk of migration.
High risk, high rewards.
Exactly. So.
Right. What a good opportunity. So this is kind of what you do as an ornithologist, studying this migration. Explain to us kind of some pretty cool things about how we do this.
Yeah, so we want to know where they're going. And to do that, we have several techniques, from bird banding. You can see that photo on the bottom right. That bird has bands on it and a a numbered metal band. So if it's recaptured, we know where it was banded. We can learn some stuff about their movements that way. We can use telemetry, so that hawk on the left has a satellite tag, a solar powered satellite tag, so we know exactly where it's going.
That's cool. Solar powered.
Solar
So
powered,
it's
yep.
going to last a long, long time.
Yes, for years even. And we can learn a lot about important stopover and winter locations. So when these birds are migrating, they'll often stop and fuel up, because migration is so, you need a lot of fuel to fly that far and that fast.
Right.
And so we need to know where those locations are, because they go there every year, year after year.
And again, as we said, these are national and international treasures. So those stopovers, that's incredibly important habitat for them as well.
Yeah, and populations can bottleneck if, for example, an important stopover location we see like deforestation or the loss of a wetland or something like that. So we need to identify these locations so that we can protect and save them.
So this is one of the ways that we get to see those maps earlier, showing all of that migration.
Yeah, that's one of the ways we learn this.
Thanks to this, we get that.
Exactly. So another way scientists monitor migration is, for example, this is called Hawk Watch. This is a program that's throughout the Western Hemisphere. This is in Veracruz, Mexico, where they saw over 350,000 broad-winged hawks in one day. So these birds flock together and they move in just massive numbers.
This is so amazing, because we think of hawks as predators, solitary or maybe a paired, but solitary. These numbers, this is not a typo.
Yeah, no.
350,000 broad-winged hawks in one day.
Yep.
So that's just kind of a tiny little part of that photograph.
Exactly. And they go, for hours on end, and these scientists will count them and get an idea of, migration timing and, how many birds are there. They can learn a lot from these hawk watch stations.
What do these hawks eat? Do you know offhand?
They're insectivorous. Sometimes they're omnivorous. They'll eat just about anything.
So are they going to eat some of the birds that are also migrating down there?
Potentially, yeah.
All right.
I don't think they would pass up a snack. Another way we monitor bird movement is actually weather radar. So this was actually yesterday, I believe. What is today? The 3rd? Yep, this was yesterday. And weather radar, birds flock in such great numbers, like you saw on the, the broad-winged hawks, that weather radar actually picks them up. And so scientists have learned how to use this to actually predict how many birds will come in any given day over any given area, just like the weather. And actually they've combined the two here. You see precipitation there on the right in gray, and then migration intensity. So high is white. And as we move through migration, in Missouri right now, we're not at the peak. We still have a few weeks to get the peak of migration, but you can log into Birdcast here and kind of predict how many birds are flying through Missouri at any given time.
And that's fascinating. I don't know if anybody else out there has seen this recently, but huge flocks of starlings, I believe. I've seen recently kind of nesting in just these big flocks, not enough maybe to make a cloud, but if we've ever seen, are they called murmurations?
Murmurations, yeah.
Those huge flocks that this radar kind of mistakes them for a cloud.
Yeah, you can kind of picture that, a giant, dense flock of birds getting picked up almost like a cloud. Yep.
And I mean, that must be a lot of kind of hash marks. How does somebody count 350,000 birds?
Well, you estimate.
Okay.
You have to kind of block it off and estimate. This is a common technique in bird biology. Waterfowl biologists do it from like airplanes, counting waterfowl and geese and things like that. So it's not an exact science, but it is, you get a general idea. Yeah.
A pretty good estimate.
A good estimate.
It's amazing. Because they're really bad at like returning their invitations and things to let you know they're going to show up, right? Yeah. So we kind of have to estimate it.
Exactly.
So we could pick it up through weather radar.
Yeah. Other ways of tracking, there's many techniques. You can, again, get band recovery. If you recapture a banded bird, you can also chemically analyze their feathers to tell from what latitude they have flown the previous year where they grew that feather. That's called stable isotope analysis. You can use what are called geolocators, where you have to capture the bird again and actually download the data. That's tricky. Radio telemetry is a very common one. So that prairie chicken there in the bottom left that has a radio collar on it, and people hand track it using radio signal. And satellite telemetry, where satellites actually pick up the signal. And those are generally the most accurate, geolocators and satellite telemetry. And I am actually going to take a little deep dive into a type of radio telemetry that we call the MODIS Wildlife Tracking System. This is a way we track birds across the hemisphere, really. And what you're seeing here in that photo is a MODIS tower with those antennas on top.
Those kind of look like old school television antennas on the top of houses, if you're old enough to remember.
Exactly, kind of like a ham radio
Yeah.
station. Yeah, and each of those yellow dots there you see on the map indicates a MODIS station.
Now, there's a lot, but there doesn't seem to be that many in the Midwest. We're gonna address that, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna show you what it is, what it looks like now here in a little bit. So the way MODIS works, we attach these tiny little tags. They can be anywhere from 0.28 grams to 12 grams onto a bird, kind of like a backpack sometimes, or you can glue them to their feathers. I'm holding a tag in my hands there in that photo. And these tags emit a radio pulse every 5 to 30 seconds or something like that. It's a unique pulse that I kind of like to think of as a barcode. And whenever a bird that's tagged flies by one of these towers, you can see on the bottom right, it kind of goes beep and it uniquely identifies that bird. It scans it like a barcode.
Kind of just like at the grocery store.
Exactly. And so here's an example of what might happen. That's a thrush that's tagged and it flies by a MODIS tower. It's detected, it's on its migratory pathway, it's detected again. So what we learned from these movements or these detections is migration timing, how fast did it fly, where it was spent the most time, things like that. We can really learn a lot from these detections. But you might imagine, well, if there's no towers, then what, we're not learning enough.
Right, right.
So, these maps I've been showing you have been from 2017. So we had sparse coverage, except in the Northeast. It's really just starting to take off, and then boom, this year.
Wow, 2025,
yes.
That's a lot.
Yes, we've had a MODIS explosion. This is a collaborative effort. This is many, many different researchers taking part in this research. And throughout the entire system, we've had almost 250 species tagged, almost 20,000 animals tagged. And these animals aren't just birds. We can tag bats. And if the tags are small enough, we can and the insects are big enough, we can actually tag really large insects.
So if it flies and a tag can fit, we can track it.
Exactly. And over 1,000 stations deployed globally. Again, I'm just showing the Western Hemisphere here, but these are global stations in over 421 projects. So
amazing the growth of that.
This is a really fantastic collaborative effort.
Now, you were saying this is our conservation agency, other state conservation agencies,
yes.
Federal organizations, private nonprofits, some individual scientists.
Exactly.
All of that.
Yep.
It's amazing.
And any tagged bird can be detected on any tower. And if we zoom into Missouri, we actually have a really robust MODIS network here in Missouri. We have 34 active MODIS stations. And my predecessor, Sarah Kendrick, actually started this process off and designed it to have sort of what we call digital fences. So those red dashed lines that I'm showing are what we're trying to fill in to capture birds migrating north and migrating south. So you can kind of imagine a tagged bird flying through Missouri would likely get captured on one of those. I like to think of them as nets almost.
Right, kind of the figurative nets.
Yeah.
Where they have to pass through one of them.
Yep. And we have 4 new towers planned for 2025. But with all these towers, all these resources, what have we actually learned? So what you're seeing here is actually the connections of individual birds. So between different MODIS towers, and all of these birds have flown through Missouri. Just a tremendous amount of species.
Tremendous.
We've detected over 50 species. We've detected over 1,100 animals, separate animals. And these birds all fly through Missouri at one point, either moving south or moving north, or they were tagged in Missouri. And this is actually kind of an artifact of the Mississippi flyway. So we call them flyways. These are like super highways for migratory birds following generally rivers or coastlines. And the Mississippi flyway is actually a really important one. And Missouri, of course, plays a really important role in that flyway.
Right, and a lot of our birders also familiar with the waterfowl that pass through. So when we talk flyway, this is what gives us the great opportunities for waterfowl just to hunt and to watch them in the state.
Exactly.
And all of these little, it's like this tapestry of strings, and it's just so amazing.
Yeah, it's all connected. And
literally,
up
it
in
is
the Arctic,
all interconnected.
Saskatchewan, Canada, the Northwest, all of these birds are flying through Missouri. An example is the eastern whippoorwill. I bet a lot of you online are experienced with the eastern whippoorwill, the beautiful song, the iconic bird.
It's one that you hear, but you seldom see because they're such expert at camouflage.
Yes, exactly. They fly, from directly north of Missouri, up in Canada, over from the Great Lakes. They all fly through Missouri down into Mexico. So Missouri is potentially really important as a stopover location for these birds. And we're learning this through the Missouri Motus Network. Just to give you kind of an example of, Motus towers, they're kind of like snowflakes. No tower is the same. We put them on fire lookout towers. We'll put them on buildings. We'll put them up we call them pop-up towers. They're standing on their own. They're powered by solar. They're even on bamboo. So in Central America, you can get these really huge poles of bamboo and put Motus towers on them.
That is amazing. Lucy wants to know, how close do the birds have to be for the tower to detect it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends on the antenna. So that bottom middle photo, you see those big antennas, lots of, they're called elements. Those can detect birds upwards of 15 to 20 kilometers. So pretty far away. These smaller ones, maybe a couple of kilometers. These birds don't have to fly that close. As long as the antenna has good line of sight, they're above the tree line, they're up. We usually try to put them at high elevations
so there's nothing interfering with kind of those signals.
Exactly.
And we talked about this a little bit earlier. Jason wanted a little bit more information. So how do you tag birds? We kind of went over that.
Yeah. So it depends on the species, but for example, wood thrush, we will actually attach, it's kind of like a little backpack with loops around their legs, and the backpack sits at the base of their tail. The tag sits at the base of their tail, and the antenna is flush with their tail. And we tighten it. Each wood thrush has its uniquely sized harness with a little touch of super glue and
there we go. And you said also the little nano tags that you can glue to a wing.
Yes. Well, you can glue to their back.
To their back. And then in addition to the leg bands that we talked about.
Exactly.
So there you go. Thanks, Jason.
Yep. These are designed to be minimally invasive. They're very light. They're less than 3% of their weight.
Do they drop off eventually? Or?
Generally, they do. Yep. Especially the ones that are glued to their back. Those fall off, within a few months. So.
Very good. Good questions, folks. Again, if you have more questions, please keep them coming. Ask them through the chat box. All right. And can the public see this Motus data by species like you showed us for the whippoorwill? So this is all available to the public.
This is all public data. Yes, you can actually log into the motus.org website, and you can explore all Motus data, including Missouri Motus data, and you can filter by species, you can filter by location, you can zoom in and see, your local Motus tower.
Well, there you go, Laura. You can go online and have some fun. Thanks.
Yeah. So, we're doing all this research, but what, I wanted to talk about the threats on these stopover sites and wintering grounds, what is causing birds to decline. And really the main culprit is deforestation through agriculture, grazing, development. This photo you see here is a palm plantation on the bottom there, and native intact tropical forest on the top. And birds can't use even though it's green, it looks lush. That does not represent food or habitat for birds.
It's kind of somewhat similar to kind of our suburban lawns.
Yes, exactly.
Where they're nice and green, but it's a food desert.
Exactly. That's exactly how it is.
And more and more of that is replacing the natural native rainforest, so hence deforestation.
Exactly. So how are we fighting this? How can we fight this? Well, MDC has partnered with a program called Southern Wings. This is a group of state and fish and wildlife agencies that kind of help facilitate the research and conservation projects that help support migratory birds.
Again, this is an international effort
Yes,
by a lot of people.
Exactly.
We all have a stake in this.
So the sorts of things that we do with Southern Wings via Southern Wings is things like tree plantings. So, you know, in the tropics, planting trees, it's actually much more profound. It happens very quickly. Trees grow really quickly in the tropics. So, you know, your tree plantings can make a huge difference in 3 to 5 years even. So tree plantings are a really good tool that conservationists have to combat deforestation. Education of landowners on sustainable ag and ranching. So things like shade-grown coffee is a huge benefit to birds. I myself have been on a shade-grown coffee farm, and it's just dripping with migratory birds. Those birds really key into these, you know, postage stamps even all across the landscape.
Do they eat the coffee beans or all the bugs that eat the coffee?
They eat all the bugs on the trees that are
around the coffee.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So what a benefit to them and to us.
Yes. And ranching too. There's sustainable ag ranching practices. You know, we don't. You know, we understand that people need to make a living and a profit, and so working together with landowners is really important. Education of locals and students on bird ecology and monitoring, kind of spreading the word on why birds are great and why they should care too. And this is happening in Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, all of these Central and South American countries.
And they're training more and more people to ban birds, and to tag birds.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
so
exactly.
Yeah, Jason, if you're ever down that way, you can kind of learn direct hand.
Yeah. And we're also helping support research on rapidly declining migratory species like cerulean warblers, golden wing warblers. Cerulean warblers breed in Missouri.
Those are the blue ones. Those really intense. The males are intense blue.
Exactly, the one you see there in the photo. These birds breed in Missouri, but you know, travel to Costa Rica in the winter, and we're monitoring their migratory movements and also their local winter movements. So this research can help us identify where declines might be happening.
Right, and this is global research that also helps us locally.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, this is just an example of some deforestation in Honduras, but with efforts through Southern Wings, through these local, you know, education practices and tree plantings and things like that, we can get closer to, you know, regrowing to that bottom right photo, which is, you know, intact tropical forest, which is somewhere that a cerulean warbler would like to be in the winter.
Very good.
I would like to be there in the winter too.
Right. Or on a spring day like today, kind of, folks.
Yeah, exactly. And here's just some photos of bird banding efforts and data analysis that Southern Wings has supported. We're educating locals on how to do research and how to spread the word on bird conservation.
It's amazing efforts, some great work.
Yeah, very fun too. Again, bringing it full circle, you know, we have had staggering bird declines. Migratory birds are at highest risk for these bird declines because they face so many risks across their migratory pathway. These are birds that we see in Missouri. They're beautiful birds. Their songs are amazing, and we want to protect them. And so through this research, through this support, we're doing our best to protect Missouri birds here in Missouri and everywhere else.
And again, we talked about our upcoming Missouri birding program and how that's going to help with this also.
Yeah, exactly. So we are getting into the registration, you know, window it's now open of the Missouri Birding Challenge, and the proceeds from the Missouri Birding Challenge actually go to migratory bird research.
That is wonderful.
Conservation, yeah.
And folks, so we encourage you, register now and then take part in the Missouri Birding Challenge from May 1st to 15th. Now, here's our website link to get to it, but folks can just Google.
They can just Google Missouri Birding Challenge if you don't want to write down that big, long website. But yeah, you can, you know.
So there's the Missouri Birding Challenge. Registration is open now through the end of April. The challenge is the 1st through the 15th. Just Google Missouri Birding Challenge. Now, as we see up there, there's different categories. There's a fee, kind of a registration fee, but you said all those funds go back towards to help.
Yep, exactly.
Birds.
Yeah, and we also have one more Missouri Birding Challenge webinar left. It happens on May 1st, so it kicks off the Missouri Birding Challenge. It's given by Dana Ripper, who's the director of Missouri River Bird Observatory, and it will be on the 7 simple actions that you can do at home to help birds. You know, in light of these, you know, staggering declines, what you can do, and you know, to really make a difference. Things
Right.
like buying shade grown coffee.
And what you've really helped us understand is to think globally about these birds. And now this is an action to help us act locally.
Exactly.
So we can think globally, act locally. Join us in, like you said, May 1st. So it'll be a perfect kickoff to help folks understand some simple things that they can do even in their own backyard.
Exactly. Yep. And Missouri River Bird Observatory and their team, they're fantastic. They do so much for bird conservation here in Missouri. So I really encourage you guys to tune in.
So if you haven't already registered, we encourage you to register for this and then come back and join us on May 1st. And thank you, Kristen, for some amazing information today.
Thank you.
So, and thank you everybody for joining us. Again, register for the Missouri Birding Challenge. Go on Google and just search for it. And you have done such a great job of helping us better understand the full annual cycle of bird migration. Thanks, Kristen, for joining us. Thanks everybody for joining us. Get outside, discover nature.